Good morning, Year 6, and welcome to your first writing lesson of the new term. I hope you all had a really relaxing New Year break. Now, to be successful in today's lesson, there are a number of things you will need. You will need a printout of today's narrative, Frances, a copy of the questions that we'll be answering later on in today's lesson, and a pen or a pencil to write with. Please pause the video now to ensure that you're ready to begin. Great. I'm going to share my screen with you now so that you can access the content of today's lesson too. In writing this term, we're going to be focusing on adventure narratives. Adventure narratives always contain an element of action and sometimes even danger that leaves the reader on the edge of their seats. But what else are the conventions of an adventure narrative? Well, there's often really unusual happenings that the reader wouldn't necessarily expect to stumble upon. You may read about or hear about some unexplained noises or sights, which will leave the reader wondering what's going on. The reader may come across an impending sense of danger. As they read on, they may feel like something bad is about to happen. And the author will always seek to build up the tension, build up suspense as the story progresses to leave the reader wanting to know more and more. The adventure narrative we're focusing on today is all about a young girl called Frances who goes out rowing in the lake alone. But before we watch a video which tells us more of her story, we're going to explore some new words that you may not yet be familiar with. They'll help us understand the story even better. So the first word we're going to have a look at is nature preserve. A nature preserve is a large area of land where you would find lots of flora and fauna. So lots of plants and animals. You can see here that the second word I've underlined is portaging. Lots of you probably know what canoeing is. There you can see 3 children in the boat canoeing. That's an activity that maybe some of you have done before, though perhaps not recently. Portaging is quite similar, except you're not inside the boat, you're carrying the boat. The park where Frances stayed with her family was isolated and pristine. My turn. Isolated. Your turn. If something's isolated, it means it's out on its own. So that means the park wasn't around anything else. No other parks or buildings were near it. And it was pristine. Pristine means that it was unspoilt. It was in a very good state. We're told that Frances was in a remote part of the park. My turn. Remote. Great. Remote means that something is far away. So Frances is in a part of the park which isn't close to anything else. The deep part of this particular lake was rumoured to be around 300 feet. If something's rumoured, it means a lot of people think that it's something. So the part of the park was rumoured to be around 300 feet. We think it's around 300 feet. It's not definite. Similarly, if you hear a rumour, it's not definitely true. It's just something a lot of people are saying. So a lot of people have said the park or the lake is 300 feet deep, which is quite deep indeed. At one point, we're told in the story that Frances falls into a contented reverie. Now, to be content means you're happy, and a reverie is a daydream, so she's almost having like a happy daydream, perhaps when she's canoeing, though hopefully not. We're then told that Frances begins to row feverishly. If you row feverishly, you row frantically or in a really excited manner. So for example, like this, if you're in a panic. We then come on to the phrase rapid succession. My turn. Rapid succession. If something happens rapidly, it happens quickly. And if something happens in succession, it happens one after the other. So if she heard knocks in rapid succession, they would sound like this. Knocks happening quickly, one after the other. And the final phrase is distinctive handwriting. If something's distinctive, it means you can recognize it really easily. So we've got lots of clues there that might help us figure out what's happened in the story. Let's watch the video and find out more.
When I was a kid in the suburbs of Chicago, adventure meant Quetico Provincial Park, up on the border of Minnesota and Canada. The name implies the place was small, but Quetico is a 1,000,000-acre nature preserve, so big you could go days and days without seeing another soul. We would go on camping trips up there, weeks of canoeing and portaging, seeing bears and moose and deer, sleeping under star-soaked skies. The park was isolated and so pristine, you could actually drink the water straight from the lakes.
So remember, we've just discussed the meaning of isolated. That means on your own, so the park was beside nothing else. Frances went on holidays with her family to the park, an isolated park next to nothing else.
But I won't be going back to Quetico anytime soon. Not after what happened to a girl named Frances Brandywine. Frances was 17 at the time, black-haired and with a reckless nature, determined always to leave the well-trod path, to break new ground and be alone. A few years ago, Frances was up in Quetico with her family. They were in a remote part of the park, camped on the shore of one of the deeper lakes, a lonely body of water carved millions of years ago by a passing glacier. The deep part of this particular lake was rumored to be about 300 feet. One night after her family went to bed, Frances took the rowboat out, planning to find a quiet spot in the middle of the lake, lay on the bench of the boat, look up at the sky, and maybe write in her journal. So she left the shore, rowed for about 20 minutes, and when she felt satisfied that she was over the lake's deepest spot, she lay down on the bench and looked up at the night sky. Stars were very bright, and the aurora borealis was shimmering like a neon lasso. She was feeling very peaceful. Then she heard something strange. It was like a knock. She sat up, guessing that the boat had drifted to shore and run aground, but she looked around the boat and she was still a half a mile from shore. She leaned over the side to see if she'd hit anything, but she saw nothing. No log, no rocks. She lay back down. She told herself it could be any number of things: a fish, a turtle, a stick that had drifted under the boat. She relaxed again and soon fell into a contented reverie.
So Frances didn't think there was any danger. So she fell into a contented reverie. That means a daydream. She's happy, a happy daydream.
She had just closed her eyes when she heard another knock. This time it was louder, crisp, like the sound of someone knocking hard on a wooden door. Except this knocking was coming from the bottom of the boat. Now she was scared. She leaned over the side again. It had to be an animal. But what kind of animal would knock like that? 3 quick, loud knocks in rapid succession? Her mouth went dry. She held on to each side of the boat, and now she could only wait to see if it happened again. The silence stretched out. A few minutes passed, and just as she began to think she'd imagined it all, the knocks came again, but this time louder. She had to leave. She lunged for the oars. She got them in place and began rowing. The water was very calm, so she should have made quick progress. But after rowing feverishly, she looked around, and she realized that she wasn't moving at all. Something was keeping her exactly where she was. Again, she tried rowing. She rowed and rowed on the verge of tears, but she went nowhere. She stopped. She was exhausted. Her heavy breathing filled the air. She cried. She sobbed. But soon she calmed herself again, and the boat was silent again for 10 minutes. Then 20. Again, she tricked herself into thinking she'd imagined it all. But just like before, just when she was beginning to get a grip on herself, the knocking came again, this time as loud as a bass drum. The floorboards of the boat shook with each knock. Now she was so shaken, she started making questionable decisions. The first was to lower one of the oars into the black water, trying to feel if there was some landmass, even some creature she could touch. As soon as the oar broke the water surface, though, she felt a strong, silent tug at the other end, and the oar was pulled under. She screamed. She jumped back. And now she had no options. All she could do was sit and hope and wait. Wait for the morning to come. Wait for whatever was going to happen to happen. The knocking went on through the night. She passed the time writing in her notebook. And it's only because of this notebook that we know what happened that night. Frances can't tell us. She was never seen again. The boat was found on shore the next day, empty but for the journal. On those pages were her frantic jottings, all written in her distinctive handwriting, all but the last page. When the journal was found, that page was still wet, and on it were 4 words, looking as if they'd been written quickly with a muddy finger. They said, "I did knock first."
Okay, so we are left with lots to ponder there, and I hope you enjoyed that short video. Later on in the week, we will be writing a diary entry from Frances's perspective to see what that night was like for her. But today we are going to delve a little bit more into the story. So you'll see from the transcript of the video that you've got some questions to answer. You'll be able to answer these questions based on that transcript. Okay, so it's all of the same skills that we would regularly practice in school. Find and copy, the phrase which tells you Quetico is not very densely populated. That means there's not many people living there. 3 activities you can do at the park. Why will the author not be visiting Quetico Provincial Park anytime soon? And then you find the paragraph that begins, Frances was 17 at the time, and answer these questions. And finally, look at the remainder of the text to answer the last 4 questions. The remainder of the text means the rest of the text. It's really important that you don't rely on the video to answer these questions. You must open up the separate transcript of the video. That means the words that were spoken in the video, and your answers need to be from that text. Now, one question I'm really looking forward to seeing your responses to is, what does this text tell you about Frances' character? Explain 2 features of her character using evidence from the text to support your answer. Have a think. When it's a 3-mark question, how many pieces of evidence and how many impressions of Frances should you include? Great, I'm so thrilled that you haven't forgotten that key knowledge. You must include 2 impressions of Frances' character and 2 pieces of evidence to support your statement. So, evidence can be, what is Frances doing or what is she saying? For example, I might say, I think Frances is a rebellious young girl because she decided to row out on the lake by herself, and we're told in the text that she's determined to always leave the well-trodden path. The well-trodden path is another way of saying another way of saying that she's determined to do the thing that most other people don't do. So that suggests to me that she's a little bit rebellious, but I'm really looking forward to see what other impressions of her character you will form. Now, finally, how does the author create a sense of fear in those final sentences. I won't be going back to Quetico Park anytime soon. Not after what happened to a girl named Frances Brandywine. This is our extension question today, and we'd really love to see your answers on Seesaw. Think about the author's choice of language and how have they left you as a reader feeling suspenseful. So, I'd like you to pause the video now and have a go at those questions. Well done for completing today's work. I'm really looking forward to continuing with this story tomorrow and seeing your great pieces of writing. It's really important that you upload your questions onto Seesaw so that your teachers can see it. And in our meeting this afternoon, we can talk about any of the questions that you found a little bit difficult. Well done, everybody, and see you tomorrow.